What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WrestleRant. We're right here on the show every single week. I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network as well as on the Global Wrestling Network. Today we're talking NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 3 ahead of this year's Brooklyn TakeOver event, which I cannot fucking wait for. I was in attendance for Brooklyn 1, Brooklyn 2. I didn't go to this show, unfortunately. I was away last year. Not that I regret not going, because the circumstances were such where I knew ahead of time I wasn't going. I couldn't make it. Where I was going is more important at that point in time. But I still would have loved to have been at this show, because arguably it was better than 1 and 2. But it's really a toss-up, because 1 and 2 are classic shows. 1 was where Bayley and Banks happened. 2 was where Nakamura became NXT champion. And also one of the greatest matches of all time happened in NXT history between the Revival and DIY for the NXT Tag Team titles. 3 was equally excellent, if not better than the first 2. So let's start breaking it down right here. We kicked off the show with Johnny Gargano taking Andrade and Almas. This match was fucking fantastic, especially considering that the feud really wasn't much of a feud by this point. Now, by the time they later encountered for the NXT Championship at TakeOver Philadelphia many months later, which I was also at the beginning of 2018, they had a feud going. Gargano had been on a redemption story. So at this point in time, going into TakeOver Brooklyn 3, Gargano had just broken up with Tommaso Ciampa at TakeOver Chicago. He was gone for a while, came back and said, I need to redeem myself. I need to be Johnny Wrestling again. So he beat like fucking Tino Sabatelli in NXT. He beat Riddick Moss on an episode of NXT. And Andrade and Almas was his first opponent at a TakeOver since breaking off from Ciampa. Andrade, on the other hand, was also on a redemption story, kind of on a, on a road to redemption himself, in that he had been losing for a long time, and then he was finally starting to find himself with Zelina Vega in his corner. He took on Cesaro Bononi on an episode of NXT, beat him, beat No Way Jose. Now, Gargano was his first major opponent since being reborn with Zelina Vega as his manager. The two worked amazingly well together. This was a really fun match, one of the best matches all year, and again, a match without a real story collectively. Like, Gargano had his story, had his own redemption, road to redemption, as did Almas, but they didn't really have much bad blood together. Like, it was announced on the episode of NXT like a week or two before TakeOver that Almas was challenging Gargano to a match of the show. But beyond that, they really didn't have any established tension, any established issues going into the show. But despite that, the match was fucking amazing. They worked so well together. One of the best openers, if not the best opener, in TakeOver history. And in the end, the finish was fantastic too. So Gargano was going in for the win, was so close in scoring and clinching that victory when Zelina Vega threw in the DIY shirt, kind of like getting into the head of Gargano, taunting him like, okay, your past is still here to haunt you, even though Ciampa's not here. So that happened. Almost takes advantage, hits the DDT, scores the victory, and he is eventually, built back up, wins the NXT Championship at TakeOver War Games many months later. But yeah, this was a fantastic opening matchup. Then for the NXT Tag Team titles, another match that really exceeded expectations, in my opinion, between the defending champions, the Authors of Pain and Sanity. Now, the build to this bout going in really was not that exciting at all. I love the Authors of Pain. Sanity were a good tag team. They still are a good tag team. Neither team has really been used to their full potential in the main roster, both on Raw and SmackDown as of this recording. But still, they were technically two heel teams coming into the show. So the weird thing was that the Authors of Pain were like the baby faces coming into the show, but they were the heels here. The Sanity were the baby faces. But despite that, the crowd was into it. The crowd was into the action. It was a great hard-hitting match, a much better match than it had any right to be. This was a lot of fucking fun. And in the end, in a major shocker, Sanity walks away as the new NXT Tag Team Champions, in the process handing Authors of Pain their first ever standard tag team defeat in 2-on-2 action, which was a big surprise. They had been undefeated for well over a year, and their reign as NXT Tag Team Champions came to an end on this show at the hands of Sanity, so that was a big shocker. So great finish, clean win, great match, and if that wasn't enough, both teams get laid out afterwards by the debuting tandem of Kyle O'Reilly and Bobby Fish. Now, we had seen Fish and O'Reilly in NXT before, They both faced Aleister Black on separate episodes of NXT in the months preceding this show, but they had yet to team up. And the big rumor was that, there's going to be a big group debuting with the Ring of Honor stable, blah, 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 including Fish and O'Reilly. Now, I did not want to see them in NXT as single superstars. Fish and O'Reilly are great on their own. They're a lot better as a tag team, much better in tag teams at this point than they are separately. So for them to come together, lay out the NXT Tag Team Champions on night one as Red Dragon or Team whatever the fuck they're calling themselves at this point, was a big deal. Was a very big deal. The crowd was into it. Obviously, they're familiar with Fish and O'Reilly. It was an awesome moment. Of course, not the last time we would see them on this show. Aleister Black taking on Hideo Itami on this event as well, and another great match. Itami was really reborn with the heel turn. He took on Bobby Roode to take over Chicago, and he fell short of capturing the championship. In the weeks that followed, he slowly underwent a heel turn, which I didn't know would work, but it did. He really found his footing as a heel, which he's also recently done on 205 Live. The guy is a much better heel at this point than he is a babyface, and that was evident here. I thought he was great here. This was a very well-wrestled match, very exciting, again, for a match that really did not have much build-up at all. Itami was knocking through people left and right in NXT, as was Black. Black had really yet to face any true competition. He did beat Almas in his debut match at TakeOver Orlando. But as, the weeks progressed, he was taking on more and more credible competition. He beat Cassius Ohno, as I had mentioned, Bobby Fish, Kyle O'Reilly. Who else would he defeat? Well, Hideo Itami was next on the list. He really proved himself here with an outstanding outing. The entrance was fucking amazing. So I think people were already into Black from the get-go. But if they weren't already sold on him, they were here, because this was a breakout performance from Aleister Black. This was fucking great. And Itami had a great showing as well. Easily the best NXT match I think I've ever seen from Itami. And he's had some good ones against Finn Balor and NXT TV, against Tyler Breeze, Austin Aries. And they never actually had the match, not Austin Aries, but Bobby Roode. They had a very good match to take over Chicago. This might have been the best of the bunch. And in the end, Aleister Black scoring the victory and remaining undefeated. Itami may have had one more match after this on NXT, but by and large, this was his swan song from NXT before being moved up to the main roster, a part of 205 Live. For the NXT Women's Championship, we had Asuka defending against Ember Moon. This was an awesome matchup. A lot better than the match in TakeOver Orlando, which I loved a lot, was a very good match. This was great. The crowd was into it. I was at the TakeOver Orlando match. The crowd was into that one as well, and it had a better build-up. But this and more, it had an equally good build-up here, because the whole story was that Ember Moon failed to defeat Asuka at TakeOver Orlando. But she was also adamant about being the one to hand Asuka her first ever defeat, and it looked like she would be, because it looked like Asuka was on her way up to the main roster anyway, so you figured Ember Moon would be the one to beat her on the way out. That was not the case. Asuka won here in shocking fashion. I was very surprised by that, but honestly, looking back at it, this might have been my favorite Asuka match in NXT. She had a lot of good ones, a lot like Aleister Black, with the likes of Bayley, with the likes of Mickie James, the Iconics, Ruby Riott, and a number of others. But she really had a great match here against Ember Moon, which was Ember Moon's best match in NXT as well. The story here was great. The near falls, near tap-out submissions, whatever, were close, very close. Asuka kicked out of the Eclipse here, I believe, as well. So that was a big moment. But again, the crowd was super into this. One of the best women's matches I've ever seen in NXT. One of the best matches all year. But I mean, maybe not as good as TakeOver Brooklyn 1 with Bayley and Banks, because that had more of an emotional attachment to it with many people. But this was up there. This was also fucking great, and if not the match of the night. This was really, 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 really good. But yeah, Asuka, in the end, still the NXT Women's Champion. With Ember Moon, it's like, what the fuck is next for her? Obviously, she would go on to win the championship at the next subsequent TakeOver at War Games. But still, this was an awesome, awesome matchup. Asuka would be promoted to the main roster, still undefeated, without actually losing the championship. I believe she was legitimately injured here, but she would drop the belt on NXT by just simply relinquishing it, and now having a tournament of sorts to crown a new champion and take over War Games later on in the year. But yeah, this was a great match. Really, really enjoyed it, with a surprising outcome, which is not a bad thing in this case. And Asuka would maintain that mistake for a little while longer before finally being beaten at WrestleMania 34, which was fucking stupid in retrospect, but anyway. The main event for the NXT Championship saw Bobby Roode defending against Drew McIntyre. Honestly, the weakest match in the entire show. Not to say that it was a bad match. They went for a while, well over 20 minutes. I was just largely disappointed. Largely underwhelmed might be a better word for it, because they had a good match. It was well wrestled, but it felt like a WWE main event where it was good, but not by NXT standards that good. Like, not NXT standards great. Like a main roster very good is like a low good on NXT. I believe anyway. I think there's two different styles on the main roster in NXT. This felt like a WWE main event with Bobby Roode and McIntyre kind of working a slow-paced matchup. I was largely bored up until the final few minutes. Drew McIntyre winning the match clean, which kind of felt a bit underwhelming. I was expecting some interference from like Roderick Strong, who had been a part of the story with these two leading into TakeOver. It really should have been a three-way with Roddy. Roddy was nowhere to be seen on the show. He had a great match with Bobby Roode on NXT TV. And Drew McIntyre did as well. I believe Roddy and McIntyre had a match on NXT TV right before TakeOver. So Roddy had his issues with Bobby Roode and the NXT Championship. But, I mean, they would, tie up that loose end on an episode of NXT right after this, before Bobby Roode left for SmackDown Live. But still, I was very impressed by the fact that he was able to get himself over the course of that story, but not actually be a part of TakeOver, which was weird. But anyway, this was a good match. McIntyre wins, becomes the new NXT champion, hands Bobby Roode his first ever defeat since arriving in NXT in the ring a year earlier, TakeOver Brooklyn 2. So new NXT champion, which the crowd was happy with, but what really made this special was what happened afterward. So when McIntyre won the championship, that was not the end of the evening. He was ambushed by behind. Well, first he was distracted by Fish and O'Reilly, who we thought we had seen the last of earlier on in the night when they attacked the NXT Tag Team Champions, but it was not. So after being distracted by them, he is ambushed by behind by none other than Adam Cole, baby, who had long been rumored to becoming NXT. TakeOver Brooklyn seemed to be the right place for it. We all figured he would be in the crowd, which I kind of figure will happen to Matt Riddle this year. But Adam Cole, I think, is a bigger star than any of those guys, like Bobby Roode, anyone else who was debuted in the crowd over the past couple of years. Adam Cole needed to make an impact from night one, and he definitely did that by laying out the NXT champion. Now, not that it was pointless in retrospect, because McIntyre and Cole did end up having a match at like a house show that was televised and shown later on in the year. But they never ended up having Cole and McIntyre feud. They just had Cole maybe it was because somebody got hurt and they changed plans, but it was weird they ended up going with McIntyre almost to the next TakeOver when it was clearly being set up as Cole and McIntyre. But nonetheless, it was a great angle. The crowd went nuts for it. Obviously, very familiar with Adam Cole, Bebe. He did Bebe at the top of the stage after the show went off the air. It was a WWE.com exclusive. It was on their YouTube channel, too. Crowd went nuts for it. It was an amazing debut for Adam Cole, one of the best debuts in NXT history, because it established the guy as a top star from the get-go, a lot like Kevin Owens, who had debuted at TakeOver Our Evolution, won his match at the start of the show. They showed him midway through the show backstage with Sami, then congratulating Sami Zayn on his NXT Championship victory later on in the night, before the show went off the air, attacking Sami Zayn, being cemented as the top heel in NXT from the get-go. Same thing with Adam Cole right here. With Bobby Roode leaving, Adam Cole immediately swept right in and took his spot as the top heel in NXT, which was amazing. So again, great stuff here. A good match, but a much better aftermath with Adam Cole showing up and laying out Drew McIntyre in the unofficial debut of Undisputed Era in NXT as a unit, which have really run roughshod over NXT over the last year. Adam Cole, the NXT North American champion, Fish and O'Reilly reigned as NXT champions a few months later. They dropped Fish got hurt, so O'Reilly won the belts or reigned as champions with Roderick Strong. They lost the belts, won them back from Mustache Mountain. So again, great stuff here. And I'm looking forward to their next match at TakeOver Brooklyn 4. So yeah, Undisputed Era really ruling the roast right now in NXT. And not to mention, they're also the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic victors from earlier on in the year as well. So Undisputed Era really made their presence felt at TakeOver Brooklyn 3. We'll see what's in store for them at TakeOver Brooklyn 4. But yeah, overall, a fantastic show. I fucking love this show. I really wish I could have been there for it, but I'm looking forward to being there for TakeOver Brooklyn 4. Yeah, like I said, the weakest match was the main event, oddly enough, but every other match was great. Like nothing less than great to awesome. So this was a fantastic show. Absolutely go out of your way to watch it before TakeOver next weekend. 2 title changes, the debut of Adam Cole, a very newsworthy show. The last matches in NXT for a number of people. Itami got called up a few months later. Asuka got called up shortly thereafter. Bobby Roode got called up literally fucking 3 days later on SmackDown Live. Almas and Gargano had their issues revisited later on in 2018. Sanity and Authors of Pain continued their feud going on into later in 2017 as well over the NXT Tag Team titles. So again, a very significant show in NXT's history was TakeOver Brooklyn 3. Absolutely go out of your way to watch it on the WWE Network. One of the best takeovers I've ever seen. By and large, one of the best takeovers of all time. So anyway, guys, thank you for checking out my review of NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 3. I appreciate your support of the show. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We will be back next week with my review of SummerSlam 2017, another show I was not at, but in this case for the right reasons, because that show sucked. And I cannot wait to rant all about it on next week's show. Now, it was not all bad, but it was largely a lot worse than SummerSlam 2016 and 15, in my opinion. But probably just because I'm biased because I was at 2 of those shows. But anyway, WrestleRant videos might be going up on Mondays now, just because Total Bellows is now over. I'll probably be moving, if I can get them done in time, that is, my WrestleRant videos to Mondays. And then I'll be doing the WWE Network and Chill videos on Tuesdays as well as on Fridays. Whatever airs on the network after Raw on Mondays, we'll review that for Tuesday, and then I'll do my reviews of Miz and Mrs. for the foreseeable future on Fridays. So just keep that in mind, in addition to the whole hashtag AskGSM videos on Wednesdays and the WrestleRant radio excerpts on Thursdays as well. So anyway, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham GSM Matthews. Enjoy TakeOver next weekend. I will be there for that show. Hopefully I can take bunches of videos, record them, and send them your way right here on the YouTube channel. But anyway, guys, be well. I'll catch your ass down the road.